Blackman is an associate professor of law at South Texas College of Law.
The other one, don't get confused.
South Texas College of Law, Houston, who specializes in constitutional law, the Supreme Court, and the intersection of law and technology. Acclaimed, unprecedented the constitutional challenge to Obamacare and unraveled Obamacare, religious liberty, and executive power. He was selected by Forbes magazine for the 30 Under 30 in Law and Policy. He's testified before the House Judiciary Committee twice on the constitutionality of executive action on immigration and healthcare. Maybe a future topic. Josh is the founder and president of the Harlan Institute, the founder of Fantasy SCOTUS, the internet's premier Supreme Court fantasy league, and blogs at joshblackman.com. He's the author of over 36 law review articles, and his commentary has appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, USA Today, LA Times, and less substantially at Federalist Society functions.
For you today. Thank you.
Professor Chandler earned his undergraduate degree summa cum laude from the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton and a JD from Harvard Law School. You might have heard of it, where he served as managing editor of the Harvard Law Review. He specializes in insurance law and related fields such as health law, economic analysis of law, and contract drafting. He's taught at the University of Houston Law Center for 8 years, winning the university, well, maybe more now.
That might be when I wrote that thing. We're up to 26.
Okay, for many years now.
That was off.
And he was previously engaged in private practice in Los Angeles, California, and Williams and Connolly in Washington, D.C. He's authored several articles on insurance law, pioneered the use of Mathematica computer language in the economic analysis of law, and his work in progress, maybe this is old too.
That's an old thing.
That's an old thing. Okay, he's going to give some counterpoints to our speaker, and I will turn it over to Professor Blackman at this point.
Thank you. It's a treat to be here. I love coming to UH because I don't have to get on a plane. I can drive 5 minutes and be here. You're all in a treat for today. One, constitutional right, but two, constitutional rights. And specifically, we will discuss how 3D printed guns are protected by both the First and Second Amendments. So, as a threshold matter, does everyone know what 3D printing is? A couple people were talking about this beforehand, right? 3D printing is merely a way of designing an object on a computer, whether it's something like a house or even something intricate like a car, and allowing a device to actually create it, whatever you design on the screen, in real time. So I'm going to give you a brief tutorial, an introduction, if you will, of how to use a 3D printer. And for those who have coded, and I encourage you to take Seth's class because he will teach you that stuff well, it's a fairly straightforward approach. Now, I know law students hate math, bear with me. For those of you who remember your high school geometry, a cylinder is basically a circle, and you stack another circle, and you stack another circle, and you make it very tall. So if I told you to make a cylinder with a height of 20 inches and a radius of 5, you would know to make something that looks roughly like that. This is precisely how 3D printing works. Using code with numbers that anyone can read, you give dimensions to a computer, and it knows what you want to create. Now you can create, small little tchotchkes. Seth, of course, has a little interwoven thing here. You can create even more intricate designs, and it all comes out of this device known as a 3D printer. Now I want to show you how this works in real time. Has anyone ever made a candle before? Right? You know how to make a candle. You take the wick, you dip it in the wax, you dip in the wax, and each time you dip in the wax, it gets a little bit thicker around the base, right? 3D printing works in the exact same fashion. But instead of dipping wax, you have this little nozzle, right? And this little nozzle sprays a very fine layer of plastic. It sprays one layer, sprays a second layer, sprays a third layer, and each layer is of a different size. So before you know it, you have an object. This spraying is this little motor that moves around all of your axes and heats up. And that's what allows the 3D printed material to solidify in this fashion. How sharp you are. This is actually an image, a series of images, of a 3D printer creating an object on a MakerBot. I won't tell you what the object is, but I want you to see when you can figure out what's being printed. Seth, don't try it. You may figure it out quicker, but all right, so here's a challenge, right? So the first layer is sort of honeycomb lattice, this very basic layer, And as a matter of structural integrity, this is how you create a fairly strong object. A second layer. If you see it, shout it out. A fourth layer. Frog, okay. Fifth layer. What? You're getting closer, fifth layer, okay. Okay, close. Sixth layer. Seventh layer. Oh, geez. Eighth layer. A bust of whom? Oh, you're right. Ninth layer. Close. Ninth layer.
No.
10th layer. Yoda! Yoda! Oh! Come on, you can see it there, Yoda? Okay, okay. Yoda from Star Wars, right? 11, there it is. 12, 14, 16, 17, and done, right? So using a fairly simple technique of spraying very thin layers of plastic in about, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, you can create a fully lifelike Yoda bust. Now, I have zero skills with my hands. I can't build anything. Give me a piece of clay. There is a 0% chance I could actually make that. But I'll tell you what, if you give me a 3D printer and some software, I could probably put that together in like not that much time. So of course, given that we live in America and given that you all live in Texas, what do you think one of the first major applications was of 3D printing technology? Of course, guns, right? Why would you make a Yoda bust, which is perfectly, accessible anywhere, when you could actually go make a gun, which is a little bit harder to come by? So this is the story of the Liberator. I showed you before the code necessary to make a cylinder, right? Right? A cylinder. The same cylinder that I described before can also double as the barrel of a gun. You see, all the parts of a gun are nothing more than shapes and sizes, which can be reduced to code. And this task fell to Cody Wilson. Cody was a law student at the University of Texas at other school in Texas. We have all of them today. He was a 1L. He never quite finished though, because during his first year of law school, he decided he wanted to rock the world by creating a 3D printed firearm. I have to note for disclosure, Cody's also my boss. He retained me in a case that he brought, which I'll get to later, but that in no way shades my opinion of him. He is a proud anarchist, and I'll be the first to tell you that. He means that sincerely. What he designed was this. Anyone know what this is? An AR-15 lower receiver. And for those of you who don't know what this is basically guts. This is what makes the gun actually work. Right? And this is actually the part of the gun that's regulated. Now, in a weird quirk of law, to buy one of these, you need to go through a federal process. But to manufacture your own is perfectly lawful. Manufacture your own plastic AR-15 receiver. Thousands of rounds, and it was perfectly strong. The next thing that Cody developed was this little white thing at the bottom. That's called a magazine. More specifically, it's a high-capacity clip that can hold about 20 rounds of ammunition. He named it the Cuomo. Why did he name it the Cuomo? Because the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, banned these magazines. Once again, Cody illustrated that things that perhaps the government wants to ban are easy enough to make yourself. What really put Cody on the map was this. What the hell is this, Josh? This is the Liberator, or at least the parts of the Liberator. It was a fully functional handgun made entirely using 3D printed parts. The only things that were not printed were this little nail, which is a fire pin, and the bullet, which you can buy at any sporting goods store for a few pennies, right? How does this look when it's put together? It looked like this. And if you notice, there's a piece of rope on the floor. Why is there a piece of rope? Because during the first few test runs, Cody wasn't dumb enough to fire it with his own finger. Because if it blew up in his hand, he would have one hand. So what he would do is he'd put the trigger and put a little rope, he'd stand maybe 10 feet away and give it a good tug. And that's how they tested this. But eventually, after several rounds of testing, question at the end. After several rounds of testing, Cody was able to fully functional gun that worked pretty well. Now, this is a single shot pistol. It fires the equivalent like a 22 caliber, a very low caliber bullet, but it works. Now, I mentioned earlier that Cody retained my legal services, right? Why? Well, there's nothing illegal, believe it or not, about making this sort of gun in Texas. California, perhaps, but at least in Texas, there's no state law, nor is there any federal law that prohibits the manufacturing of your own firearm. So what then is the problem? Is it illegal to 3D print a gun? The answer is actually a little bit complicated. Long before Cody Wilson came of age, people were making zip guns. People know what a zip gun is, right? A zip gun is a firearm you can make at home with stuff you can find at the hardware store, okay? This is a gun. How did someone make it? They combined a garden hose with a soldering iron. With a little bit of welding, you can make your very own pistol. This is a little keychain flashlight that was repurposed to become a firearm. All you need to make a gun is something sharp to hit the back of a bullet and a cylinder to contain the explosion. That's it. So let me show you a video, actually a series of clips, not the video itself, of how a bunch of idiots built a gun. Now, do not try this at home. I can't say this warning enough. These guys are morons. Why will become obvious very quickly. So how did they make a gun? They took a metal pipe and a shotgun shell. The metal pipe is a little dimple. They loaded the shotgun shell into a rubber tube, and what they're going to do is jam this metal pipe into the back of the shotgun shell, which pierces the back of the bullet, creates a charge, goes boom, and sends a projectile forward. Now, does anyone see what's problematic about firing on this area? Anyone see the problem? Okay, well, the obvious thing is they're inside, right? That's the object. Don't shoot inside. But second, these electrical wires going down from behind, basically shooting at electrical wires. These guys are idiots. And you can't quite see in this picture, but this picture becomes more clear. There's a fan going. And the fan is plugged into those wires. And this box, as it has been shot several times before. So these guys, again, are morons. Ready? Ready, guys? 1, 2, 3, boom. We made a gun. And look up, smoking, cartridge coming out. They just fired a thing inside. They will throw on a wall. Good for them. Now, why do I show you this video? You may say these guys are idiots. You're right. But the important question is, have these individuals broken the law? And according to our good friend at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, our favorite convenience store, the answer is no. There is nothing problematic about making a gun at home. Now, there may be local ordinance about firing a gun in city limits, but there's no federal crime at issue here. Had they done the same thing in the hill country of Texas, no one would have cared. Now, why did Cody need a lawyer? Cody's problem wasn't the fact that he built the Liberator. Cody's problem was the fact that he put the blueprints for the Liberator on the internet. He didn't realize there was any problem with that. In fact, most of you, when you put stuff on the internet, don't think a damn about the government because you don't think about it. But the government sent him a letter saying, Mr. Wilson, the fact that you put a file on the internet means you are engaged in the illegal export of arms. Whoa. So we filed suit, myself and Alan Gura, who was the lawyer behind the Heller McDonald case. We filed suit against the State Department a little over 2 years ago. And we challenged this under both the First and Second Amendments as unconstitutional. We have some statutory arguments, but not nearly as sexy, but I'll stick to the sexy constitutional ones. So the First Amendment, at its bottom, prevents the government from imposing what's known as a prior restraint of speech. And specifically, classification based on the content of speech. Such a restriction is subject to strict scrutiny, and it's very hard for the government to justify a prior restraint in this regard. Here, the government is explicitly censoring Cody's speech based on its content. If this was a cylinder used to, I don't know, a bowling pin or something, right? It'd be fine. But the fact that the cylinder can be used as a gun part is where the state comes in. Now you say, wait a minute, Josh. We're not talking about printing Yoda dolls here, right? We're talking about printing a dangerous gun that can kill someone. I'm with you. Texts, books that teach you how to make dangerous stuff. I hear some of you chuckling. The Anarchist Cookbook. It was Bill Ayers' like Bible, right? It's basically a hand guide to be a terrorist before there was Al Qaeda, right? It teaches you how to make pipe bombs. It teaches you how to make poison. It teaches you how to do all these very bad things. You can be certain that booksellers, when there were booksellers, tried to sell these, and the government banned their sale. And the courts consistently held the mere fact that speech can be used to facilitate a crime does not deprive it of protection under the First Amendment. Wait a minute, Josh. Wait a minute, you ask. This is a book, an actual book. We're talking about code and files. My friends, information is speech. The mere fact that you reduce your ideas to zeros and ones rather than pen on paper does not deprive it of its value. Now, the court has said there's a difference between functional, binary stuff, right? On the other hand, you have expressive speech, right? I showed you that code at the outset for a reason. Explain to you how 3D code works. It's understandable by any human being. And this is very much expressive speech. A 2011 case called Sorrell v. IMS Health. The Supreme Court recognized that the creation and dissemination of speech, not just creating, but disseminating that information, are embraced within the meaning of the First Amendment. And I think this is a very important threshold to understand. The mere fact that you a video game rather than a violent fairy tale does not deprive it of protections under the Constitution, right? We live in a world governed by data. And I think courts are, faster than I expected, grappling with that reality and recognizing the First Amendment does have implications when so much of our designs are indeed done on a computer. So that's a First Amendment argument in a nutshell. Wait a minute, I got where I told you. I got to the Second Amendment, right? The Second Amendment provides that a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep bear arms shall not be infringed. What does this mean? Well, in 2008, in a case called District of Columbia versus Heller, the Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment provides an individual right, not a right that's collected as part of a militia service, but a right of individuals to bear arms. Later, in the case called McDonald v. City of Chicago, the court incorporated that right to the states that now neither the District of Columbia nor the City of Chicago were allowed to ban guns altogether. I'm not sure if saying anything more than that. Indeed, in the almost decade since Heller was decided, the court has not seen fit to elaborate on what the Second Amendment protects. Does it protect the right to carry? Does it protect the right to have an AR-15? Does it involve restrictions on sales? The court has simply ducked those issues. And when I gave this talk before the election, I'm like, I hope they keep ducking it. Now I say, I hope they address it in due time. Yeah, there was a game of keep away, ready to go, but now you go from defense to offense. I'm not joking, pretty serious about this. But I think even within the court's own precedents, we can extrapolate a bit and understand two sub-features of the right to bear arms. And this first one, I call the right to acquire arms. Now, I am not saying that the state has no interest in regulating the sale of arms. I'm not making that point at all. Point that in order to bear arms, you have to get the arms from somewhere. So imagine the government had a law that said, you can keep a gun, but you just can't buy one from anyone. And you can't make one, you can't make one, you can't buy one, but you can have a gun. Well, that may, be okay for people who already have guns. What about new people want to get them, right? So for example, in the Heller case, right? Dick Heller actually had a gun from the 1970s, from before the DC law into effect. So he actually had one and didn't need to buy one. But as a consequence of the court's decision, he got a license to purchase a gun. So I think it's a fairly reasonable extension of the precedent to say that the actual acquisition of an arm is part and parcel of this right to bear arms. You can't acquire it where you can get it from. On a more profound level, more than actually buying an arm, the Second Amendment embraces the right to make your arms. long before there was Walmart and Dick's and Cabela's, if someone wanted a gun, they had to make it themselves, right? In fact, there's a long tradition in this country, people manufacturing their own arms for self-defense. If anyone's ever seen the John Adams miniseries on HBO, I'd highly recommend it. There's this great scene where you have Abigail Adams pouring these lead balls for the muskets for the militiamen, right? We have a very long tradition of making our own arms. In fact, I think it's even stronger than the right to buy arms. These rights, of course, help to describe putting 3D printed blueprints on the web, right, is basically teaching people how to make arms. You're teaching people how to make their own guns. In this sense, the First and Second Amendment operate as hybrids. What we're doing is telling people they can't speak about their constitutional rights. To use a different example, imagine the government passed a law saying it's illegal to say Merry Christmas, the actual war on Christmas, right? You cannot say Merry Christmas to anyone. Is that a violation of free exercise? Is that a violation of free speech, or a little bit of both? Government passes a law saying you cannot print a book describing techniques to perform abortions. You cannot print a book about that. Is that infringing on the First Amendment, or is that a 14th Amendment due process issue? Or maybe a little bit of both. So we have this notion of hybrid rights where rights work in tandem. I think this is actually an instance where the government's actions violate simultaneously. It's hard to do that, but it does that. Both the First and Second Amendments of the Constitution. Okay, so that's a constitutional argument. But we also have statutory issues. We have something called the Undetectable Firearms Act. That? No. Back in 1988, Congress enacted the Undetectable Firearms Act, which basically says any gun must have a certain quantity of metal in it, such that if you go through a magnetometer, it will set it off, right? The Liberator has a block of metal soldered into its handle, more than enough to trigger the metal detector. Now, Cody's 3D printed guns are fairly new, right? Why would anyone in 1988 even think to have this law? Well, it had to do with the handgun known as the Glock. But more precisely, it's Bruce Willis's fault, right? Why is it Bruce Willis's fault? In the movie Die Hard, a classic Christmas movie, he has this line, which I'll do my best. He says, "The Glock 7 on me." You know what that is? It's a porcelain gun made in Germany. It doesn't show up on your airport X-ray machines here, and it costs more than what you make in a month. Every single thing he said was wrong. Every part of the sentence was false, right? There is no Glock 7. It's not made out of porcelain, it's made out of metal. It's not made in Germany, it's made in Austria. It will show up in an X-ray machine, and they're actually fairly affordable. So, firstly, everything Bruce Willis said was false, but Congress reacts to movies, nothing new, and they impose this ban on non-metal guns. So even 30 years later, the law still puts restrictions on the Liberator, but again, Cody got around this by putting a metal chunk inside the handle. Okay, so there is no actual statute prohibiting the Liberator. Senator Schumer tried to ban it. That didn't go very far in the Senate a couple years ago. Right? This is actually one of Cody's marks of pride that Senator Schumer tried to ban his device. This is like, you know, if you ever wind up in a poster next to Senator Schumer, consider that an accomplishment. But there have been several other proposals of how to deal with this 3D gun problem. One professor said, well, we need to ban the plastic, right? The scourge of 3D guns is so bad, we need to ban the materials used to create them. Well, there's actually a shop in Austin that figured a way to 3D print a metal gun. This is a 1911 handgun made entirely out of steel on a 3D printer. It has good weight, good balance, it fires like a charm, right? So even if you ban the plastic, good luck with it. You need to ban gunpowder. That way people will be able to shoot 3D guns. Okay, never mind. That's the type of thing law professors would say. A serious possible way that 3D guns can be regulated is through intellectual property. So there's a concept known as DRM, Digital Rights Management, which you may be familiar with. And this is a notion that when you buy a song on iTunes, you actually don't own the song, you merely own a license to it. And that license is revocable by Apple at any time. Why do we have these? Because the producers who make the music don't want you ripping off their songs. This is not limited to music, it also applies to books. When you buy a book on your Kindle, unlike the book on your shelf, you don't actually own the book. You have a temporary license to it. Years ago, that was actually crazy, where people who bought the book 1984, right? The #1 bestseller now, right? The dystopian classic, 1984. One day woke up on their Kindle, the book was gone, right? Why was the book gone? Because the publisher got into a dispute with Amazon. So Amazon said, screw this, we're deleting the books from devices remotely without any notice. So you don't actually own the books on your Kindle device. Similar concerns attend 3D printing, right? Why? Are deathly afraid of 3D printers. Because if you can 3D print the newest pair of LeBron James sneakers for like $5, then you don't have to spend $200 and wait online for them, right? These are goods which are made with fairly low skill in sweatshops in third world countries, right? And Nike's making a killing on them. So why can't you just make these shoes yourself? So herein lies an economic principle known as the Baptists and the Bootleggers. Seth is smiling, right? Has anyone ever heard the Baptist and Bootlegger concept? Yeah, what is it?
Basically the idea that
I know you guys are in the same line too. I don't want to.
there's like two different faces. One a public face saying legislation, which the Baptists that will somebody please take the children.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
The bootlegger behind me on the campaign or talking to senators, they wanted for some protections.
Anything to add?
Yeah, it's the simple, same concept, but your picture gives out a million ways. It just shows how most people want prohibition, but they want it for different reasons.
Right.
Prohibition, bootlegger wants you to keep it prohibited because from Cuba, we want to get billions and billions of dollars going prohibition, and the Baptist preacher thinks he wants it because of all the sin.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, here's how this works, right? Whenever you have any sort of public legislation, there are usually at least two factions favoring it, right? You have the Baptists. These are people who want to get rid of alcohol because alcohol is evil. But then who also wants to get rid of alcohol? The bootleggers. Why? Because it jacks up their rates, right? They can make their moonshine and their speakeasies and make a killing, right? So you always have the Baptists and bootleggers in these coalitions to skew. By the way, if any of you have a dry county nearby, you'll find that on the border of the dry county is a liquor store. The reason why you still have a dry county is because that liquor store is keeping the law in place through lobbying. Trust me on this, guys. Trust me. I promise. So what's the Baptist and bootlegger coalition here, right? It's actually Kanye West, right? Right? Actually, maybe he's a bootlegger. I don't know. It's hard to figure exactly. But on an actual episode of the Kardashian show, which I promise I do not watch, he said, "I am afraid of 3D printing because the internet destroyed the music industry. Now that's what we're afraid of, right? Because someone can print up a pair of the Yeezy sneakers for $5 of material and not spend $200 on its latest line." Okay, now who are our bootleggers or Baptists, depending how you look at it? The gun controllers, right? The gun controllers say, wait a minute, we have this scheme that we can use to protect IP. Let's smuggle in some gun control there, right? Let's put a filter on printers that says if you try and print a pair of Yeezy sneakers, it won't work. Or if you try and print a gun, it also won't work. Has anyone ever tried making a copy of a $100 bill on a high-quality copy machine? Oh, you guys are more honest. Seth, you never tried that?
No.
So it won't work. So if you go to a high-quality color copy machine and take a U.S. currency, it will actually spit out an error message. Why? Because Treasury worked with Xerox to put in a little filter that if it senses the indicia of a currency, there's certain indicia there, it simply won't work. I don't know if it sends a message to the Secret Service, but it for sure won't make a copy for you. Right? The same technique can be used on 3D printers where the government installs filters, but it's not just for a specific watermark on currency, it's a very specific marker. Here it's a general thing, well, this kind of looks like a gun, so we're going to ban it, right? There are serious problems there, but I think the Baptist and Bootlegger coalition may actually make it feasible, okay? The primary avenue, this is how the government went after coding, involves export control laws, okay? There's something which you'll probably never study in law school, but now you know, called ITAR, the International Traffic in Arms Regulation. ITAR was a series of regulations that began in the Cold War that were designed to keep away from the Soviets military technology. It made lots of sense. We don't want American companies sending Stinger missiles to Afghanistan, right? That's a fairly sensible policy. But in the decades since, the executive branch has interpreted this law in ways that were never imaginable. Specifically, if you want to publish a book, photography, even if you're not trying to send the book abroad, the government now asserts a license requirement, that you need to submit the book to the government before you publish it to get approval. That's insane. The courts have had this weird relationship where they kind of strike it down and the government changes the regulation and the case goes away and this keeps going over and over again. So we've never had a definitive resolution on the legality of this regime until now. I'm sorry, in May of 2013, the State Department, Secretary Kerry, sent a letter to Cody Wilson saying, hey, Cody, we've noticed that you've put these files on the internet. These files are controlled by the US munitions list, right? Now, look at the way it's described, right? You put a Liberator pistol on the internet, right? You put a file for the Liberator pistol on the internet. You see the difference there? They didn't accuse him of jamming a gun into his USB port, right? Putting it online. That wasn't what happened here. They said, you as an American citizen put a file on the internet, and you didn't send it to anyone, you merely put it on the web, and that was engaging in export control law. These files were removed from public access immediately. Immediately. Okay, so we, Cody's co-counsel and I, we brought suit, arguing that this was void under the First and Second Amendment, that this was beyond the scope of the president's authority under the export control laws, and a host of other due process claims. It's often the case when the Second Amendment's at issue, judges forget what they're actually doing, right? If any of you read the Washington versus Trump decision a couple days ago, the court said, unless we have evidence that a person from these countries actually committed a terrorist act, we will not allow this infringement of the rights of non-citizens. Contrast this with our case, where an actual citizen is exercising his rights. They said, well, because someone could download these files and engage in a terrorist act, that's enough for a prior restraint. Give me a break. We actually submitted a 28J letter. This is a letter updating the court of authority saying, hey, you guys, this is a Washington v. Trump case. If that means anything, it means we win. Alas, the district court ruled against us. The Fifth Circuit ruled against us. We filed a petition for a hearing on bonk about 2 or 3 months ago, and that's still sitting around. The longer that sits, the worse it looks. And now, though, this case may still have legs in light of recent developments. But the point I'd like to stress is that this is a fairly novel application of the First and Second Amendment, but it does present a very important vehicle to illustrate the scopes of our rights and to what extent can the government censor information on the internet. This is not a gun case, which is how people probably think of it. It's primarily a case of the government using this power to shut down American speech. If they can shut down speech about guns, we use this example in our brief, what if someone put files on the internet, pardon the phrase, of how to make a dildo? And some Saudi person said, you know, we think that's against our beliefs. We don't want our people in Saudi Arabia getting this information. Can you shut down this speech? I think the answer would be, of course you can't, right? But the second it involves guns, judges lose their heads. Like, oh my God, guns are bad, they're evil. If there's any modicum of consistency, say, wow, this is the Bill of Rights too, yeah. Dildos not so much, but guns is in there, right? Then I think this is a very easy case, but so far the courts have not been receptive. So I thank you for your attention. I look forward to my good friend Seth Chandler for giving comments, and I'll address your question at the end. Thank you, Seth.
So, I'm just going to give some quick reactions to the talk. The first is that as a descriptive matter, Josh's talk is very accurate, very interesting. And while his extension to dildos is interesting as well, we can also go in the other direction and think about products that are than sex things, and wonder about how far does Josh's constitutional right extend. So, for example,
We'll trust the word, Seth.
Oh, all right. What if, and we don't have to go too far into the future, what if we have DNA printers? And so people can start downloading the blueprint about how to make, oh, I don't know, the smallpox virus or other biological weapons of mass destruction. Or what if 3D printers become a little more sophisticated, and instead of working in ABS plastic, which I think is what this gun is made out of, which is basically, if you want to know what it is, go look at a Lego. It's the same stuff as Legos. We can start, and right now it can do it, I believe that is made out of some form of metallic rosin, that object there. It's not plastic. We can start to use 3D printing for titanium or for other more advanced metals. And someone decides they don't want a stupid little gun, they want a full-fledged machine gun, or they want artillery, or I don't know, let's go really whole hog, they want the lens piece to a nuclear weapon. So what really Josh is describing, what this 3D printing technology is doing, is it is lowering the cost of making things that are fantastic, right? These 3D printers are great, but they have the capability of making things that are extraordinarily dangerous, that hitherto would have been challenging. There's a difference, for example, in my way of thinking, between a zip gun, which is mildly dangerous, and perhaps something that could be made, maybe something more dangerous than Cody actually attempted to manufacture. So as a descriptive matter, I think in thinking about this issue, we need to not just think about Cody's cute little handgun, but also about what are we going to do when people start to build things that are yet more dangerous with these 3D printers. The other thing is, to some extent, his client has perhaps thoughtfully not posed the hardest constitutional cases. So for example, what if Cody wanted to remove that metal block from his gun so that it was now undetectable by an airport security authority or a courthouse or other places where we have metal detectors? Is Josh contending that it's unconstitutional for the Undetectable Handgun Act, in fact, itself unconstitutional because it abridges the right to bear arms? And so to me, what Josh's talk is interesting is that it gets at this issue of not so much whether a Second Amendment right exists. I would say, yes, there is a Second Amendment interest and right in possessing a gun, but to what extent, these are the hard questions that the Supreme Court hasn't answered yet, and who knows when they will, about what is the content of that right. For example, yes, it would infringe your ability to print a gun if the government were to require 3D printer makers to somehow put in some artificial intelligence that prevented you from making a gun on it. But what if instead the government were to say, look, you can acquire a gun. They're not that expensive. You can go down to Walmart or Academy or lots of places in many jurisdictions and get a gun. We just want some control over knowing who has the gun so that when they do bad things, there is at least some remote possibility that we will be able to track down the miscreant. And so I'm not so sure that infringing one avenue towards creation of a firearm is necessarily an unconstitutional abridgment of whatever right exists to acquire a gun. And to me, the interesting question is, how far can government go in regulating, in balancing, for example, the advantages of having traceable, so that people might feel some deterrent to using them wrongfully, or might have some difficulty on getting them on board an airplane where they can blow up a building or hundreds of lives, and the interest of the individual in protecting themselves against harm, which strikes me as the core of the Second Amendment, which I might have thought you could already exercise by most people by going to many places, at least in Texas, where you can get your gun pretty easily. So I'm going to stop there and open it up along with Josh and enjoy hearing your comments.
We have till 50, right?
Yes.
All right, so let's do the questions. Maybe I'll work in my response to Seth in the course of my answering. Let's do a couple hands before. Actually, you get first crack. You had a question before.
My question is more about, I didn't understand how the plastic doesn't is this special sort of plastic?
It's actually a very good question. The reason why the first few Cody had to use the string was that the plastic's not very strong. The actual process of making the barrels it's very time-consuming. It's a treat with this acetone and vinegar bath, which actually strengthens, the vapors actually strengthens the plastic. So contrary to the court's representation, it's not enough to just print these parts. There's actually human effort that goes into making them. So this isn't just click to print. You actually have to know some basic chemistry to make the plastic hard enough. Oh no, he gave the instructions as well, but said if you merely print this without the treatment, it's going to blow up in your hand. which is not very smart. Yes, sir, in the back.
This is really interesting, because I just read something about it, someone made the instruction of their client's company, I believe, is Defense Distributed. And the instructions are actually posted on torrent sites for making.
Oh, we didn't post those.
No, I understand, and I won't infer you did. But Defense Distributors even moved out past the 3D printing to a methodology that actually carves the lower receiver out of solid blocks of metal now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're promoting. And to the point of, although you can go into a store and buy a gun, the issue is that any gun that you buy in the store has a serial number, it can be traced.
Not all guns.
Not all guns.
Yeah.
Okay, well, many, most, as far as I know. And the reason, the concern for making your own is because they are actually untraced, and there is no method of identifying how many are made or where they're at.
Okay, so sure, I'll answer that. So, contrary to what a lot of people would think, most gun purchases are not traced, right? The government has no idea how many guns I have. They have no clue. I bought them legally. They have no idea. You have an instant background check, which checks if you're a criminal, and after that, they keep no record of it. And that's quite deliberate because Congress doesn't want to register who owns guns. So the traceability is really a factor of some states. States have that, but not the feds. In terms of the AR-15, let me explain what the student asked about. The guts of the gun is this metal thing that basically receives all the bullets and fires them out. You can make that yourself with a machine jig, right? You can actually buy online with no background check what's called 80% lower, which is the piece of metal, but it's not completed. You can finish off with some drills and holes. What Cody did was he made this machine that if you put this receiver in, it then starts zzz, and drills all these holes in it and makes it perfect, right? The actual machine itself is not subject to control, but the government said the code used to make the bits move regime. So actually part of our case is the code for the so-called ghost gunner that's at issue. But maybe I'll address part of Seth's question now. One of the good limiting principles in our case is we're talking about things protected by the Second Amendment. The handgun is, nuclear weapons are not. Indeed, there's a lot of case law saying that classified information about nukes are not even protected by the First Amendment. There's a pretty established case law there. So I'm not having much of a problem by saying that these sorts of classified, really dangerous things are beyond the scope of the First and Second Amendment. But this is a very good test case because it involves specifically a handgun, which was the core of the right in Heller. Other questions? Yes, sir.
So, like, how does this, like, obviously the government's telling them to not put code up online. How does that play to, like, that government can apparently at times compel or try to compel a company to write code in order, for example, to say, like, crack an iPhone? Like, they're saying, we want you to write code or to do something. Here they're saying, don't want you to put it all.
So these are different doctrines, right? The first is what's the doctrine of prior restraint. The government can't tell you, shut up. But the second is the doctrine of compelled speech. This was the famous opinion from Justice Jackson involving the Pledge of Allegiance. If there's any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it's a government can dictate what is orthodox, right? The government can't force you to salute the flag. The government can't force you to have live free or die in your license plate. The government can't force you to use transgender pronouns. Keep an eye on that one also. But here too, I think there's a problem of self-incrimination when the government forces you to actually unlock your own phone. This came up with the San Bernardino guy with his iPhone. I think they were able to hack it themselves and get password security. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In the vest. Yeah, you. Yeah. You'd be nice.
Do you have any? What's your proposal? Like, what's the opposite side of your spectrum?
Oh, sure.
Not the delirious ones, not the.
Look, the government's position here is not insane, right? And I agree this is some of a close question. Say, look, we don't have to wait for some rogue terrorist to download Cody's blueprint and shoot the world leader, right, in an airport. We don't have to wait that far. We need to take prophylactic steps. And because of, Seth mentioned, we can't trace it, the only way to stop this is nip in the bud and issue a blanket ban on putting these files on the internet, period. They said, look, if you want to change these files, you can mail your friend a CD-ROM or a thumb drive with the files, and that's an adequate method of exchanging information. They've argued that, right? Again, I'll put my other hat on. That's not consistent with any First Amendment case law. So what they're basically saying is this is something that's so new, novel, and different that the normal rules of the road, like the Pentagon Papers case, doesn't apply. But
Would you accept any restriction on this 3D printing at all absent the nuclear?
well, I Seth asked this question. I think the metal chunk, right, the untypical part, that's fine. If the government wants to pass a law saying if you have to make it detectable in a metal detector that in no way impedes its function, I'm fine with that. I don't have any problem with that at all. And in fact, Cody's gun does show up on the body scanner with or without the metal chunk. Yes, sir.
Would you think optional to Cody's side in any way if their distribution was somehow controlled instead of any ever posting it to the internet? If you were to put the code, say, on like a flash drive or embedded in the code, like a unique number, to say, 001X43, that's
That the government's argument is that the only way to do this is to literally mail people thumb drives in the mail. There's a lot of problems with that, but one is this is a fairly collaborative technique. It's an open source code base, and it's simply impossible to do sort of open source development. If any of you ever do work for defense contractors, right, where you actually are subject to ITAR, you have to issue their lock and key. You can't talk about this to any foreign person. It's a strict liability offense. Even if you're sitting in Starbucks, right, and you're working on this code, and some guy who's a foreign national looks over your shoulder, you've just broken the law. It's a strict liability offense. In the Fifth Circuit, Judge Jones, who's based here in Houston, had a hypothetical that was pretty good. What if instead of putting this information on the internet, Cody had printed into a book, you know, a big book, but a book with the code, right? And Houston Public Library, a non-citizen walks into that library. Can the government then ban that book? Now, if you're a government lawyer, and the question is, can you ban a book? The answer has to be, no, you cannot ban a book. But the lawyer and arguer said, well, it would depend, which means yes. So your arguments are all well-founded. The difficulty here is that it's really hard to square with First Amendment precedent. Judge Jones wrote a 35-page dissent on this point, which I'd encourage you to read. It's called Defense Distributed versus Department of State.
I could just not be remembering the constitutional law class very well, but what is the problem with, like, nobody disputes the fact that guns have the potential to be deadly. If I pull a gun out in front of somebody, they feel a certain reaction to that, they feel a threat, or whatever they feel. I can't shout fire.
That's not good case law anymore.
Right.
No, Brandon, I mean, but that one irks me. That was Holmes' opinion. The actual test is an imminent threat of danger. It's called Brandon versus Ohio, right? You have to have an imminent threat of harm to actually censor speech. It's not about shouting fire in crowd theater.
So then it would be if somebody actually prints it and takes it out of their home, you could say that.
Well, killing someone with a gun is always illegal. The question is, how far up the pipeline can the government act? Here, they're not stopping them from committing a crime, but merely sharing the information altogether. So it's far removed from the actual acts of crime, right? They're trying to say we want to stop it now, long before it even gets to that point. And in terms of speech, that's a little bit too early for the government to intervene. Yes, ma'am.
So acknowledging that people make guns in their own homes all the time, and acknowledging that the government does have some right to regulate weapons to some degree, what is there, if you don't allow them to regulate this at all, just sharing a file, what is to stop people from producing a gun that doesn't have that chunk of metal in their own 3D printer at home? You can't restrict it to individuals making them.
My answer to that is absolutely nothing the government did here stops that from happening. The file's available in torrents everywhere. So if they want to engage in a prior restraint that doesn't even achieve their goals, it's very hard to justify when Cody, in fact, is not trying to do that. I think we're out of time.
You're out of time.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all for coming.